Ladies and gentlemen, Jai Hind and welcome to episode number 104 on VasanthiMā's channel. I call this very unusually Dance of Death, and many people may not see eye to eye to start with. But by the end of this discourse, I'm sure every one of you would agree with it. That's the power of the debate that even Adi Shankaracharya took forward to the greatest of philosophers of his times. Yes, Dance of Death on Rādhā Jayanti, janm-āṣṭami, exactly a fortnight after Sri Krishna Jayanti, also an Ashtami. I've written a separate article on Ashtami on katham.in, so I would not venture into repeating what I said over there, which is a very detailed account of how great Ashtami, the bisection of Paurnami and Amavasya, is. Right now, the focus is on the song māḍu méikkum kaṇṇé by none other than the self-realized ūttuk- kāḍu venkata kavi su-brahman-ya iyyar. This great composer lived between 1700 in the Common Era to 1765 for 65 years of one of the most phenomenal spiritual lives as well as offerings that are of still great benefit and will be forever. VasanthiMā's cousin LalliMā's request with a dance performance by the latter's granddaughters Kāvyā and Pārthīvi on the occasion of Sri Krishna Jayanti and janm-āṣṭami. All of you are familiar with Kāvyā. I'll talk to you about Pārthīvi in a short while. But destiny, or rather Radha's unparalleled bhakti, decided that this episode sees the light of the day only on Rādhā Jayanti this weekend rather than the Krishna Jayanti a couple of weekends ago. Yes, Rādhā Jayanti is from 9:50 a.m. this Saturday to 7:47 a.m. this Sunday, but since it's the Tithi at sunrise on Sunday, most people celebrate it throughout the day on Sunday. Coming to the casting, so as always, the BMI along with ourselves. BMI standing for the body, mind and intellect. But here we are breaking it apart into its three constituents. Yes, the body, that is the physical bodies of all living beings, not just yours or mine. That we shall call as māḍu or cow. The cow is symbolically representing the physical bodies of all living beings. And secondly, our emotional mind, the M of the BMI. That is in the song yaśōdā or tāyé, as Krishna or kaṇṇé refers to her, and that is being played in the dance performance by Srimati Kāvyā Santōś, daughter of Srimati Sudha Shanmugam and Sri Shanmugam AG. Our rational intellect is the third player in this game. His role is as Nanda Gopar. There's no equivalent in our dance drama. Kāvyā would enact for him too in the background. And the fourth and final and the most important is our dark, attractive and reality perceptive spiritual self, the Atma, that is none other than Krishna, referred to here fondly not as Krishna but as kaṇṇé or the I, because that's the perception of reality that is so very critical in our spiritual paths, whatever it be. And that is being played in the dance drama by none other than Pārthīvi Vishwa Prasad. Introducing Kumari Pārthīvi Vishwa Prasad, a budding artist who is much taller in many respects for her age, even literally so. The debutante's name means earth-born Sita Lakshmi and is written in many different languages for you to read if you understand the scripts in Hindi, Sanskrit, Bengali, Gujarati, Kannada, Telugu and Malayalam. Pārthīvi, 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 of course.
Namaste. māḍu méikkum kaṇṇé நீ போக வேண்டாம் சொன்னேன் போக வேணும் தாயே தடை சொல்லாதே நீயே māḍu méikkum kaṇṇé நீ போக வேண்டாம் சொன்னேன் 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 māḍu méikkum kaṇṇே நீ போக வேண்டாம் சொன்னேன். போக வேணும் தாயே தடை சொல்லாதே நீயே. 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 காய்ச்சின பால் தரேன் கல்கண்டு சீனி தரேன். காய்ச்சின பால் தரேன் கல்கண்டு சீனி தரேன். காய்ச்சின பால் தரேன் கல்கண்டு சீனி தரேன். கை நிறைய வெண்ணெய் தரேன் வெயிலிலே போக வேண்டாம். கை நிறைய வெண்ணெய் தரேன் வெயிலிலே போக வேண்டாம். மாடு மேய்க்கும் கண்ணே நீ போக வேண்டாம் சொன்னேன். காய்ச்சின பாலும் வேண்டாம். கல்கண்டு சீனி வேண்டாம். காய்ச்சின பாலும் வேண்டாம் கல்கண்டு சீனி வேண்டாம். காய்ச்சின பாலும் வேண்டாம் கல்கண்டு சீனி வேண்டாம். உல்லாசமாய் மாடு மேய்த்து ஒரு நொடியில் திரும்பிடுவேன். உல்லாசமாய் மாடு மேய்த்து ஒரு நொடியில் திரும்பிடுவேன். போக வேணும் தாயே தடை சொல்லாதே நீயே. யமுனா நதி கரையிலே யமுனா நதி கரையில் எப்பொழுதும் கள்வர் பயம். யமுனா நதி கரையில் எப்பொழுதும் கள்வர் பயம். யமுனா நதி கரையில் எப்பொழுதும் கள்வர் பயம். கள்வர் வந்து உன்னை அடித்தால் கலங்கிடுவாய் கண்மணியே. கள்வர் வந்து உன்னை அடித்தால் கலங்கிடுவாய் கண்மணியே. மாடு மேய்க்கும் கண்ணே நீ போக வேண்டாம் சொன்னேன். கள்ளனுக்கோர் கள்ளன் உண்டோ கண்டதுண்டோ சொல்லும் அம்மா. கள்ளனுக்கோர் கள்ளன் உண்டோ கண்டதுண்டோ சொல்லும் அம்மா. கள்ளனுக்கோர் கள்ளன் உண்டோ கண்டதுண்டோ சொல்லும் அம்மா. கள்வர் வந்து என்னை அடித்தால் கண்ட துண்டம் செய்திடுவேன். கள்வர் வந்து என்னை அடித்தால் கண்ட துண்டம் செய்திடுவேன். போக வேணும் தாயே தடை சொல்லாதே நீயே. கோவர்த்தனகிரியில் கோரமான மிருகங்கள் உண்டு. கோவர்த்தனகிரியில் கோரமான மிருகங்கள் உண்டு. கோவர்த்தனகிரியில் கோரமான மிருகங்கள் உண்டு. கரடி புலியை கண்டால் கலங்கிடுவாய் கண்மணியே. கரடி புலியை கண்டால் கலங்கிடுவாய் கண்மணியே. மாடு மேய்க்கும் கண்ணே நீ போக வேண்டாம் சொன்னேன். காட்டு மிருகமெல்லாம் என்னை கண்டால் ஓடி வரும். காட்டு மிருகமெல்லாம் என்னை கண்டால் ஓடி வரும். காட்டு மிருகமெல்லாம் என்னை கண்டால் ஓடி வரும். கூட்டம் கூட்டமாக வந்தால், கூட்டம் கூட்டமாக வந்தால் வேட்டையாடி ஜெயித்திடுவேன். கூட்டம் கூட்டமாக வந்தால் வேட்டையாடி ஜெயித்திடுவேன். போக வேணும் தாயே தடை சொல்லாதே நீயே. பச்சமுள்ள நந்த கோப பாலன் எங்கே என்று கேட்டார். பச்சமுள்ள நந்த கோப பாலன் எங்கே என்று கேட்டார். பச்சமுள்ள நந்த கோப பாலன் எங்கே என்று கேட்டார். என்ன பதில் சொல்வேனடா, என்னடா பதில் சொல்வேன் என்னுடைய கண்மணியே. என்ன பதில் சொல்வேனடா என்னுடைய கண்மணியே. ஓஹோ அப்படியா, பாலருடன் வீதியிலே பந்தாடுறான் என்று சொல்லேன். பாலருடன் வீதியிலே பந்தாடுறான் என்று சொல்லேன். பாலருடன் வீதியிலே பந்தாடுறான் என்று சொல்லேன். தேடி என்னை வருகையிலே ஓடி வந்து நின்றிடுவேன். தேடி என்னை வருகையிலே ஓடி வந்து நின்றிடுவேன். போக வேணும் தாயே தடை சொல்லாது நீ. மாடு மேய்க்கும் கண்ணே நீ போக வேண்டாம் சொன்னேன். போக வேணும் தாயே தடை சொல்லாது நீயே. மாடு மேய்க்கும் கண்ணே நீ போக வேண்டாம் சொன்னேன். போக வேணும் தாயே தடை சொல்லாது நீயே.
Any interfacial joint, sandhya, for a novice seeker or sadhak is literally one of the many apt or conducive spatio-temporal coordinates to effortlessly maintain the deconcentrated no-mind state, that is dhyanam, which is actually our naturally characteristic state or default factory setting amongst all such joints. Sandhyas, while dawn is quite commonly praised as the auspicious Brahma Muhurtam, midnights seem to get all the bad press. In reality, especially for the spiritually inclined yogi, more so the tantric yogi, as well as the physically indulgent bhogi and emotionally despondent rogi, for different reasons, midnight is an equally significant joint. And I cannot stress this more. It is also a Sandhya Kalam, the midnight Sandhya Kalam, which most people ignore, that I call Shakti Muhurtam, and beckons strengths hitherto unknown, as we saw on 2 occasions last month, just 4 midnights apart from each other. Be it independent Bharat in 1947 Common Era of Sri Krishna in 3228 BC. Both of them are midnight occurrences, my dear friends. As was famously stated and oft repeated during an mid-August 75 years ago, at the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, SIC of course, India will awake, not even awaken, India will awake to life and freedom. Within 4 days of our Amrit Kal, our self's black hole-like attractiveness, Sri Krishna reappeared at midnight to remind us to redeem Swaraj, self-rule, as our birthright, ultimate freedom from the cycle of birth and death, leading us towards eternal happiness. Surrendering our BMI's charge entirely to our dark and attractive self, which is perceptive of the reality, is true freedom from our BMI's illusory multiple identity crisis. This song is composed in the format of a conversation between our dark, all-absorbing, all-radiating radiating self, Krishna, known as Kaṇṇé, and its current host, BMI, that is, in general, and mind in particular, enacted by Mother Yaśōdā. Our mind, alias Yaśōdā, requests our self, alias Atma, alias Krishna, not to leave the BMI, effectively trying to avoid or postpone death, as most minds tend to do. Now you are getting a hint into why I call this episode as the dance of death. Because when Yaśōdā, the mind, is asking Krishna, ourself, the Atma, not to leave, it's essentially saying, I want to live longer. I don't want to die right now. So the Atma leaving the BMI is the situation of death. In particular, leaving the body along with the mind and the intellect and wandering off to find next best option. So in response, our larger than the largest universe, yet smaller than the smallest subatomic particle, Atma, that is toddler Krishna, persuades our mind. Mother Yaśōdā, you see here Pārthīvi persuading Kāvyā not to stop the inevitable death. Yes, death is inevitable. That which is born has to die. Hence, death is inevitable. So, the smaller than the smallest subatomic particle Atma, played by toddler Krishna more than 5,000 years ago, and right now by Pārthīvi, persuades our mind, played by Mother Yaśōdā many millennia ago, now by Kāvyā, not to stop the inevitable death. A dramatically engaging dialogue between our omniscient self, that is all-knowing self, and the emotional mind, played out in proxy between a naughty kid and its caring, compassionate mom, makes this double-meaning poem absolutely entertaining, whichever angle you look at it from. But if you look at it from this Advaitic interpretation that I am sharing with you through my deepest of meditations, I am sure it's going to make a jump start in your of sadhana. VasanthiMā has rendered an ūttuk-kāḍu number earlier too, the same composer's song, in episode 67, titled Surfer to Wave Rider, Alaipayude, in Kannada Ragam Aditalam by the same ūttuk-kāḍu venkata kavi su-brahman-ya iyyar. In case you have missed that wave, it's time to get drenched in the devotional wisdom of ūttuk-kāḍu's swan song. I'll try to provide a link to that at the end of this video. Looking forward to your comments, likes, shares, and subscriptions with notifications, because things can't get more awesome than this, my dear friends. So please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe to this channel, because we are taking you on an Advaitic path to the highest of spiritual attainments possible while being alive. Despite theoretically knowing about its own fleeting nature, the emotional mind, that is Yaśōdā or Kāvyā, gets so attached to our enlivening self that it hesitates to let our self, that is Kaṇṇé, Krishna or Pārthīvi, go when it needs to. It hesitates to let ourself go when it needs to. Our mind hesitates to let ourself go when it actually needs to. At the time of death. நீ போக வேண்டாம் சொன்னேன். That is the problem. The mind doesn't want to give up its attachment. But our self, kaṇṇé, being forever liberated, cannot be held back in one single possessive BMI for long. In fact, it's not just one BMI, Yaśōdā or Kāvyā, but every other life form or māḍu too is sustained, méikkum, by none other than our all-perceptive self, kaṇṇé. So the reference to Krishna as kaṇṇé is very important from the point of view of perception here. All-perceptive self is what we are. So let's start with the Pallavi, where Yaśōdā, our emotional mind, addresses māḍu méikkum kaṇṇé நீ போக வேண்டாம் சொன்னேன். And in the Anupallavi, Kaṇṇan, our own self, perceptive self, all perceptive self, that I am, that you are, we all are, it responds, போக வேண்டும் தாயே, தடை சொல்லாதே நீயே. In this charanam, what happens is our emotional mind tempts, காய்ச்சீன பாலும் தாரேன், tempting ourselves with nutrition, which is actually of significance only to the body, not to ourselves. Then it says, கற்கண்டு சீனி தாரேன். Our emotional mind is once again tempting ourselves with taste, which is is of significance only to the senses, not to ourselves. Then the mind goes on to say, "Kai niraya vennai thārēn." Our emotional mind is tempting ourselves with the abstract philosophy of significance only to the intellect. Why is the butter abstract? Because an abstract is essence or synopsis or summary of a much larger work, and that is the way butter is derived from milk, by converting it into curd and eventually extracting the very essence of that curd by churning it into butter. So our emotional mind is tempting ourselves with the abstract of significance only to the intellect. Then she goes on to say, that is the mind goes on to tell our Atma, "Veyilile poga vendam." Our emotional mind is tempting ourselves not to venture in energy fields of interactive significance to life itself, that is prana, because the sun is just a part of our own prana or life, and there's no way that their exchange of energy can ever be stopped, even if the mind tries to stop it. So how does our self or kaṇṇé respond? Our self says, "Kaichina paalum vendam." Our self naturally rejecting any need for physical nutrition. Our self is metaphysical, beyond physical. Why does it need physical nutrition? It puts on a show in Krishna's avatar of stealing butter, eating it, etc. But all of that is highly symbolic and figurative. That for another day. Right now, our self is naturally rejecting any need for physical nutrition. Then it goes on to say, "Karkandu chini vendam." Our self sensibly rejecting all ostensible needs for sensual gratification. Goes on to say, "Ullasamai māḍu meittu." Our self would rather cheer as a cheerleader, providing access to physical nutrition for the physical bodies of all living beings. Sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka prayas, sabka vishwas. Our self goes on to tell our mind, "Oru nodiyil thirumbiduven." What does this mean? Death is but a temporary and voluntary disconnect of ourself from a particular BMI in transition to another karmically more suitable newborn. Then we go on to the second charanam out of 5, where Yaśōdā, the BMI, or rather the mind, tells Yamuna Nadi Karayil. Again, many people just would literally translate it as that particular river's banks, right? No, there's far more to it than that. On the periphery of our self-restraint, because Yama or Yamuna is associated with our self-restraint, just as in one of the most preliminary aspects of Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga that we discussed in great detail in Katham, Yama or Yamuna refers to that self-restraint. Yamuna Nadi Karayil refers to on the periphery, on the boundary, on the edges of our self-restraint. What happens? Eppoludum kalvar bayam. There is always a risk of temptations. Kalvar, many people would just translate as thieves, but this is actually an inner drama going on within each one of us, and that kalvar or thief is nothing but our own temptations. So, on the periphery of our self-restraint, there is always a risk of temptations. That is why the New Year resolutions and other resolutions and promises that we make are all broken. Then he goes on to say, actually our mind goes on to say, "Kalvar vandu unnai adithal." The mind claims, whenever we succumb to temptations, kalangiduvai kanmaniye, we tend to be disturbed by self-pity or guilt, isn't it? Whenever we succumb to temptations, what happens? We either tend to be disturbed by self-pity or guilt, or both. So our self or kaṇṇé or pārthīvi responds, "Kalvarukku kalvar undo." Our self responds, "Are there temptations even for the tempter? I am the tempter. I am the one who is making all this drama, this leela. Kandadundo sollum amma. Have you observed, O mind? Are there temptations even for the tempter? Have you observed, O mind? Kalvar vandu ennai adithal." If temptations even attempt to attack our inaccessible self. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Atma cannot be cut by a knife, cannot be burnt by a fire, cannot be wet by water, etc. So that is the level of our inaccessible self, who we really are. Now, if temptations even attempt to attack our inaccessible self, what will happen? Kandatundama kiduven. They will be automatically disintegrated into pieces by ourselves. Who will be automatically disintegrated into pieces by ourselves? Those temptations which attempt attempt to attack our own Atma, which we really are. Next, we move on to Charanam 3, another dialogue starting from the mind, Yaśōdā or Kāvyā, and going to a response from Pārthīvi, ourself. Let's start with Yaśōdā, the mind, which says Govardhana Giriyil. Again, people will just translate it into mountain of particular geographic location. Well, that is also true historically and geographically. Far more significant is here and now. Wherever you are, wherever I am, it means go essentially is life, Vardhana is progress, and Giri is the peak. So what the mind is saying is that even at the peak of progress in life, what happens? Ghoramana mrigangal undu. What it means? Not just wild animals are there. Terrifying animalistic tendencies such as lust, greed, anger, hatred, jealousy, and other such things still wander around, isn't it? Govardhana Giriyil Ghoramana Mrigangal Undu means that even at the peak of progress in our life, in any dimension of life, whether it is in wealth or health or education or in profession or in family, even at the peak of progress in life, terrifying animalistic tendencies still wander around. Karidi Puliyai Kandal, the mind tells the Atma that we really are Karidi Puliyai Kandal, witnessing the market's bearish downfalls and royal tiger-like bullish surges. Kalangiduvai Kanmaniye. The emotional mind mistakenly believes self would be disturbed, not having recognized its stoic stability. Without even batting an eyelid, our self or kaṇṇén or pārthīvi responds, Kattu mrigangal ellam, all animalistic tendencies, ennai kandal odi varum, tend to run towards ourself to recharge for their very survival. Koottamaga odi vandal, yet when they gang up in cartelization to attack the very source of life, ettayadi vendriduven, our self being omnipotent is more than potent enough to hunt and win over the game. Then we go on to the fourth charanam, where Yaśōdā or the mind, our own mind, tells through Kāvyā, Pasamulla Nandagopar, though it seems affectionate, our sharp intellect forever safeguards our assumed ID by its very job definition. It's natural for our intellect. Once we assume any particular identity, the intellect will automatically start safeguarding it. So though it seems affectionate, Pasamulla, our sharp intellect, Nandagopar, forever safeguards our assumed ID by its very job definition. Thus, Balan enge endru ketal, the mature intellect characteristically pursuing the path of jnana is inclined towards self-enquiry. Balan enge endru ketal, but who is the Balan? Ourself, right? So who am I is the question. Just like Ramana Maharishi used to ask. And in particular here, he is asking Balan enge endru ketal. Not just who am I, but where am I? Enna badil solvenada? The mind asks ourselves. The emotional mind is unsure how to respond to such a self-enquiring intellect and therefore surrenders to our self in bhakti. So in the path of devotion or bhakti, the mind inquires, Ennada badil solven, from ourself as to how to deal with the self-enquiry of the intellect. Ennudaya kanmaniye ekamudan thediduvar. He will search for you in right earnest, like a father searches for a son. But who are we talking about here? The intellect's self-enquiry is in right earnest by harnessing the universal intelligence. So kaṇṇén or ourself through Pārthīvi responds, Oho! Appadiya, relishing the entire gameplay or leela unfolded by itself, ourself paints the quizzical look of, is that so? To the emotional mind. What fun it is. Palarudan Vidiyile, ourself engaging with fellow seekers, other sadhaks, go-yatris on the path. Vidiyile, on the path towards our goal of life. Pandaduran endru sollen, in the ball game of life, then asks the mind to inform the intellect about these pursuits. Ourself engaging with fellow seekers on the path in the ball game of life, then asks the mind, Yaśōdā, to inform the intellect, Nandagopa, about these pursuits. Tedi niyum varugayile, while the mind thus accompanies the intellect in a combined path, Sankhya Yoga equals Bhakti Yoga plus Jnana Yoga. So while the mind or Yaśōdā thus accompanies the intellect or Nandagopa in a combined ultimate search for our self, that is the Atma, our true nature, as the one and only goal of life, then what happens? தேடி நீயும் வருகையிலே ஓடி வந்து நின்றிடுவேன். That is the assurance of ourself, the Atma. Our self itself abandons all its escapades, its games, its leela, running back towards the well-deserving BMI, the well-deserving body, mind and intellect of the sincere seekers or sadhaks. This is the wonderful song. Looks so very simple when taken superficially. You can enjoy it as an entertainment, but a much deeper entertainment and an educative entertainment and something that takes you to the very goal of life is through this Advaitic interpretation. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to share these deepest of insights with you. These are not my insights, but the insights that I derive from the universe through my deepest of meditations, and it is therefore something that belongs to you, that I am just a conduit for. I am a tap through which you are getting the water that actually belongs to you, the water of life, of spirituality. Enjoy.